and then great. And we'll get things going here. So as Kim said, I just want to thank everybody on behalf of the panel here. Thank you for coming, spending your afternoon with us to talk about crafting an effective personal statement. Just a matter of housekeeping. Be sure you log in through Handshake so we know you actually checked in, that you were here, so we can follow up with you afterwards, maybe send out some information about resources, a copy of the recording and whatnot. To get started, I just want to set the stage with recognizing the importance and stress everyone feels when they're confronted with needing to create a personal statement, whether that's for our graduate school program, medical school admissions, a fellowship, a scholarship, a residency program. This is not easy writing to do. I think we all recognize this here on the panel, and that's why we're here today to help equip you with tools and tactics and strategies to make this a lot easier and a bit less painful. Remember too, a personal essay is one part of a package of application materials in most cases. So while there is emphasis on this, and there should be, it's not the only thing. You know, you have your resume, letters of recommendation carry a lot of weight, transcripts, test scores. So just to put it into perspective, this is a component to a wide collection of materials. I'm going to start off here just with some self-introductions. I'll begin and then we'll pass it on to the rest of our panels. My name's Robert McMahon. I'm an Associate Director of Career Development at the University Career Center. We're one of several resources you'll learn about today where you can turn for help when it is time to apply for those graduate programs, professional schools, and whatnot. Next, let me kick it off to Kim, since you're next to me.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob. Hi, everybody, and thanks again for attending our session today. My name is Kimberly Bucksbeck. I'm the Director of Pre-Professional Health Advising. So if you are in the audience and potentially applying to professional school in one of the 9 areas that we support, we are here to help you to build your application to professional school, and a big component of your application is your personal statement. Barbara?
Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Gorka. I'm the Director of Fellowships Advising, and I work with students who are applying to national fellowships and scholarships, as well as internal opportunities. And we also work with students who are applying to graduate school who might come to us to ask us to review their personal statement, and we're happy to do that as well. Stephen.
Yeah, so I'm Stephen Kelly. I run the Writing Center, which is part of the Student Success Center, which you may have seen, may have used before. Our physical location is on the 3rd floor of Charles Library. We also have Zoom tutoring as well. But yeah, so we provide free of charge writing tutoring to any Temple student for any writing project you're working on. And in particular, we spend a lot of time training our tutors to work with personal statements and think about the types of things we'll be discussing in this workshop. So that's a resource you can also take advantage of in the very near future.
Great. I put a note in the chat just to bring it up to your attention in case you haven't seen it. Type in there what type of program you're applying to. Is it a specific master's degree, a PhD, law school, any of the professional schools in the health professions? We just like to get a sense of who you are, what you're interested in. It might help inform as we go along today. Let me walk through an outline of today's session. Kim, this is where you'll click next. Excellent. We did some introductions. We're going to overview the elements of a personal statement. We'll review some best practices. We're going to do some analysis and discussion of sample intro paragraphs. So actual writing that we'll all collectively take a look at and be able to critique and provide feedback on. And then there'll be some additional tips and links or connections to resources that are available to you. Typically, this runs around 45 to 55 minutes, but we're always open to questions at the end. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat, and one of us will continue, we'll be monitoring, and we'll try to jump in a timely manner. So personal statements. Think about the audience first and foremost. And these are rhetorical questions for you, but put yourself in the shoes of someone on the other side, on an admissions panel, for example. Who do you imagine will ultimately be reading your personal statement? What kind of mood might they be in at that time? A mindset that this person will have while they're reading. You can picture they may very well be faculty members who have spent a day teaching classes or doing research, and now they're confronted with a stack of application essays. So what kind of mindset are they in? What kind of writing is going to impress this type of person? And then what won't impress this person? So these are things to consider as you're writing your own. Occasionally put the other hat on and think, okay, is this something that that person would want to read? If you were on that committee and you had to choose someone from similar grades, similar test scores, similar backgrounds, perhaps, what would you be looking for in their personal statement? Now, remember, the personal statement is one piece of the puzzle. So we mentioned this to remind you not to be redundant. The committees that review these things will most likely have access to your academic transcript, a resume, your test scores, and other basic information about you. Occasionally, I've heard of, and maybe others can confirm, blind interviews where they don't have any of these things. But this is very rare. It's your essay is part of a package, and all that information exists. So you don't need to repeat everything that exists elsewhere. You may want to point at it, flag it, a highlight. How is the personal statement unique from the rest of the application? Well, in that case, I think it's unique in that you get to connect a lot of dots together and tell a story. And how can that personal statement best build on those other documents? And that's part of what we're going to work through today. A personal statement is an indication of your priorities, your interests. It's a story, and importantly, it's your story. It's a narrative, it's an argument perhaps, and it's a reflective resume all in one document. This sounds like a lot in what is often 500 words, 1,000 words or less, 4,500 characters with spaces, depending on what your requirements are. But this is the gist of it, and by the end of today, I'm hopeful that you'll see how these things connected. Stephen's going to help us take that next step towards this.
Right. Thanks, Robert. Yeah. So something about the personal statement to keep in mind is that when you see the writing prompt, the instructions that you've been given, it's going to be very brief, and it's going to suggest that it could be pretty much anything, like just the story of your life. Explain why it is that you want to be a dentist. Explain your interest in going to medical school. But in fact, it does need to be very specific things. And they are, in fact, looking for particular qualities. It's not as wide open as it might seem, which is maybe one of the biggest difficulties of this type of writing. So the first thing, as Robert mentioned, it needs to be a narrative. It needs to be the story of your life, but not every single thing in your life. It needs to specifically focus on your academic and your career trajectory that has brought you to the moment where you will potentially be joining this institution, getting into this school, getting into this research environment, getting this scholarship that's going to represent the values of this institution, whatever it is that you're applying to. That's the focus of your life narrative here. And within the scope of 500 words, 2 pages, 1,000 characters, however long it happens to be. It's not very long, but you have to cover like quite a few chronological elements of your life that tell the story leading up to this moment. And you have to do all of that in a way that is hopefully, preferably engaging, interesting, uniquely you, something that, like Robert said, if somebody's reading the 5th application for today and it's been a long day, it's 5 p.m., something that's really going to be memorable and stand out to them. So there's some questions here about the chronology, but Kim, if you could go to the next. Yeah, so you want to have a large sense of the past in your personal statement because that's what you know most about what has already happened. But also don't forget to include the present and then also the future. So for the past, you're going to focus on specific examples and stories and details, the experiences that have shaped you into the professional that you want to be. Like Robert said, like you are already turning in a resume or a CV, transcripts, like all this information can be found elsewhere in your application package. So you really need to focus on the ones that are most memorable, most unique, that tell the most about who you are as this person, as this future professional. Then you need to kind of segue, transition into some talk about the present. Who are you? How do you see this type of work? How do you see your place within this field? How do you see your vision of what you want to contribute to this field? And then ultimately, towards the end of your personal statement, covering all of this in very few words, a surprisingly few number of words, you want to move into kind of two scopes of the future. So there's the near future, which is specifically why do you want to go to this particular school? Or why do you want to be part of this particular fellowship program? What is it that makes you a good fit in terms of what you know about what you're applying to? But then looking even further into the more long-term future, once you've graduated from that program, gotten the degree, whatever, you will then be a representative of their institution. You will have their stamp of approval on you. So what do you see as your longer term sort of reflection on the world, impact on the world? What is your ultimate goal that sees this application as just a stepping stone towards that goal? So past, present, future in two different senses. And then Kim, if we could go to the next slide. So that's just one thing you have to kind of accomplish within this very short document. So it's also an argument. So as you're telling these details about your life story, you're also telling them in a very persuasive, focused, argument is a word that means like a thesis or like the position that you're claiming. I'm not saying that you need to be like argumentative or using any kind of conflict. Don't get confused here. But basically making a persuasive case for yourself, that you are someone who will be a good fit for this program, that you understand what this program is looking for, what they're trying to do, that you'll be ready to hit the ground running, so to speak. That of all the potential things that you could be applying for, that you've specifically chosen this one because you know that it's a good fit for you. And while you're arguing that, you have to be professional, you have to sound competent, you have to sound confident. And then finally, in addition to those two things, on the next slide, your personal statement is a reflective resume. So like Robert said, it's kind of it's almost a map. It's the personalized kind of narrative map to the rest of your application, which is to say you don't need to list every single like research project you've ever done, every single job or internship or organization. Nobody wants to read through all of that once again if it's already there in the resume. But you do want to kind of point towards that information that's found elsewhere in your application and kind of reflect on what it means. This is the one opportunity to really kind of put a spin on it, so to speak. You can't really explain things in your CV or in your resume, but here you can explain like why it is that you spent 5 years doing this thing that maybe seems irrelevant to the field, or why it is that that there's a gap in your CV. You can put a spin that kind of puts all the pieces together and makes them see you as the human being who has lived this entire life and put together this entire package. So I'm going to pass it. I believe we're moving on to Kim now.
Yep. Thanks so much, Stephen. And well said. So I think to kind of drive in on some of the things that were mentioned previously, we do understand that writing a personal statement, there is a lot to it. And we hope that what we've said so far is emphasizing the fact that everybody's statement should be unique. Everybody's statement should hone in on why they are ready for this program of interest, this scholarship of interest. And it should really hone in on how all of the experiences and your life lived have brought you to be ready to apply for this job, this experience, the professional school that you're applying to, or perhaps the scholarship that you're applying to. What we're going to talk about next are some of the best practices to consider when writing your personal statement. And for this particular section or slide, we're really going to hone in on the show, don't tell. So what you see here on this screen are 4 vague abstract statements that are very common when we see drafts of personal statements. And so what we emphasize is that when you're writing a personal statement, you want to try to avoid being vague. You want to avoid being abstract, and you want to be very specific. So I ask that you take a look at these 4 statements. I'm passionate about helping people. I believe dentists play an overall important role in health. My empathy will make me good at my job. I've always been a hardworking and committed person. So with these abstract statements, think about what can be added to one of these. Select one of these and think about what can be added to these to make it more compelling and specific. And we welcome participation in response to this task here. And that could be by way of putting a response in the chat, how you can turn one of these statements around to make it more compelling. Or you're welcome to come off mute and give us an example of what that might sound like. But please don't be shy. We do want to see activity here.
I can give it a try.
Thanks, Jordan.
So, I go to the Fox School. I'm an undergrad, but I was gonna try. I'm passionate about helping others. I'm passionate about helping people because growing up, my family was in the funeral home service, and I got to see how to be empathetic with people and the struggles that people had. Also, turning into a career where I get to service people before they get to the death aspect and make sure that they have plans in place to properly grieve.
That's great. It's very specific. I would say your response also connected to some of the dots that Stephen was saying, the past, present, future. So that was very good. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else want to give it a shot?
Lewis contributed in chat and talked about the final sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about balancing school extracurriculars and maybe also a job. Yes, and like that's heading in the right direction where you're being in an ideal world, you don't even need to make statements like this. The goal is to show them so that you don't even need to waste your 500 words on saying something that is then evident from the story that you tell. So yes, specifics is the way to go.
Great. How about one more?
I can try one for my empathy will make me good at my job.
Thank you.
Maybe I could say something like through volunteering at homeless shelters and food banks.
Mhm.
My experiences have provided or helped me develop um, a level of empathy and understanding toward underrepresented communities um, that will, I don't know, like further equip me for, I don't really know how to end it off, but
But it sounds like what you're trying to do is connect all that with
yeah,
going forward, that past, present, future connection of things.
yeah.
Very good. Very good. So you took the word empathy and you defined it from your own experiences and you're connecting it to your future plans. That's very good. Perfectly said. So let's go a little bit more into some best practices towards, the common things that we see in personal statements. And we have a lot of information on this slide, but to reiterate the show don't tell, we highly recommend starting with vivid examples and not using vague statements. So instead of telling the reader what you feel or value, show it through actions, behavior, and experience. So for example, what we're using on this slide, don't just say I'm passionate about German. Show it through a story, like listening to German music, cooking German food after studying abroad, like using an experience to tie in an example of how you are passionate about German. You need to go beyond just the statement. You need to show it through lived experience. Another best practice when writing your personal statement is to avoid cliche and general statements. A very common one I like to help people. We see this all the time. And if we're going for a career in anything, we're going into a career to help people. So instead of using general statements like I help people, again, you want to be very specific and provide examples. Describe a moment, a setting, or an experience that basically can show your motivation or growth. So, for example, volunteering at the free clinic, that is very specific, taught me how health education can empower underserved communities. That's a little bit to the example that we heard previously. You want to avoid being cliche and use experiences to help build out your statements. Another thing in terms of best practices is, especially in your personal statement, we realize it does say personal statement, but you want to try to avoid getting too personal. So deeply personal and traumatic stories, they can be powerful, but you want to try to use these types of things very carefully. And you really want to, for a personal statement, like Bob said in the very beginning, you are given a certain amount of character limits to stay within. You want to be very direct in responding to the question, and keep the focus. If you do want to include something personal, talk about your resilience through that situation as well as development. And then finally, just to this slide in particular, you want to avoid starting your personal statement with something catchy just because you think it's going to grab somebody's attention. You don't need, this doesn't need to be a creative writing story, or you don't need something overly dramatic to grab attention. Going back to being authentic, your experience, your lived experience has brought you to this moment. Admissions committees really want the authenticity and substance, not just something to stand out where there's really no good evidence backing up your story. So for some professional schools, for example, or some essays that you might write, what we try to make sure our students know is that we're really trying to hone in on those experiences that have been completed during college. So one of the best practices that we say is to avoid experiences from high school unless they are extremely influential to this next step for you. The idea is you want to select a few experiences that really define your motivation for this next step. But really, admissions committees want to see your maturity, your current perspective. And so honing in on the experiences during college that have shaped your interest are really what you should be focusing on. Coming back to the authentic voice, certainly, please be sure to use your authentic voice in your statement. This is not to say you're going to use casual conversation throughout your personal statement, but your personal statement should sound like you. Your personal statement will be reviewed by admissions committee. You will be asked about things in your personal statement during an interview. So you want to make sure it sounds like how you speak. So if you don't usually use big words, don't use them. So you want to really strive to write your statement clearly, concisely, and directly. You want to avoid writing your personal statement in such a way as Joey did in this Friends clip.
I don't understand. Some of the words a little too sophisticated for you.
It doesn't make any sense.
Of course it does. It's smart. I use the thesaurus. On every word? Yep.
What was this sentence originally?
Oh, they're warm, nice people with big hearts. And that became they're humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps. Yeah, and hey, I really mean it, dude.
Take home message, make sure your writing sounds natural to you and write in your own voice. That's always still very funny. Okay, so I guess final slide on best practices. You want to stay centered on your own story. So connecting that past, present, future, and the dots to you. This is your personal story. It is about you, what you are, who you are, what you've been through, and how your experiences have shaped your path. We don't recommend using this opportunity to recap on all of your experiences, but to maybe use this as a reflection and opportunity to connect the dots between some specific experiences. It doesn't need to be a reiteration of your resume, as we've said before. So every sentence should reveal something in your personal statement about your motivation, your values, your character, as well as connecting all of your experiences together and your readiness for this next step. And now I'm going to pass it off to Stephen, who's going to talk a little bit about the use of AI and should I use AI in my personal statement.
Yeah, so this is our first time talking about AI within the context of this workshop. And I want to say that this is very much evolving in every possible way in terms of what products are out there, what you can access for free, what they can do, whether you're allowed to use it. But I think to say this kind of as quickly as possible, I've listed 5 questions here, and I want you to think hard about each and every one of these questions. And if you can very firmly say yes to all 5 of them, then maybe it's okay to use AI. If you have doubts about any of them, then don't use AI. This is a personal statement. So first and most important, is it allowed? Is it acceptable for you to be using it? Some applications will be running detectors software to see if you're using it. You will have to attest on some applications that you did not use it by clicking a checkbox or whatever. So just thinking in terms of, is this something that would be appropriate for me to use AI for this type of application? And if it's not allowed, then obviously don't use AI. Is it accurate? So there's a big question about it getting information wrong, it hallucinating certain facts. Of course, it's probably not going to know anything about your personal life unless you're already somewhat famous on the internet. But just in terms of accurate, is it really an accurate way to explain how you feel about situations you've done, what you actually experienced on these past jobs, these internships, in these classes, whatever it is that you want to be talking about? You want to make sure that it's actually reflecting how you genuinely feel about all of that. Even if it is allowed for you to use AI in order to do this in your application, you might eventually be in an interview, and maybe the person interviewing you was really captivated by a particular paragraph in your personal statement. If you don't really feel any connection to that, and maybe don't even remember what it was possibly or how it was phrased, then that's not accurate. Is it engaging? Like, in other words, is it written well? I do feel like ChatGPT is becoming better at writing like pretty decent sentences. So it is possible that it could write something that does sound memorable, that is interesting, um, that is it's definitely going to be grammatically correct for sure. But in a lot of cases, just because it's grammatically correct doesn't mean that it's actually written all that well. So the four of us were kind of testing out, putting like little tidbits of resume information along with some common personal statement prompts into ChatGPT. And yeah, like it has a good vocabulary, it has good grammar, but it doesn't do the show don't tell that Kimberly was just talking about and that we did in the interactive part just now. Like the examples it uses are very cliche, very vague, very hollow. They're not very memorable at all. And then finally, is it worth it? And is it you? And when I say, is it worth it? There's so much to consider about putting your personal information into the database of a corporation, about the environmental effect that using AI has. It uses like 8 times as much electricity as just doing a Google search. Is it worth it to kind of replace yourself and your own personality with a robotic output? Do you feel like that's worth it in the trade-off of what it would be providing you with? And then is it you? Of course, it's not actually 100% you, but it is possible that you could interact with an AI in a way where you do still feel like a sense of ownership and authority over it. So yeah, if you can answer yes to all of these, then okay, you might want to consider playing around with AI. But if there's any question about any of these, then definitely do not. Your own authentic voice, even if it has a grammatical error or a misspelling or whatever, is going to be, I assure you, 100% more interesting and memorable and engaging than what ChatGPT or another AI product can produce. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Barbara.
Stephen, there's a question in chat that do you recommend any AI software for writing? I don't have one that I would recommend, but
I don't. It's hard to endorse any particular product just because they change so quickly. I've done research into a lot of them, and it's like what is available today might have a paywall tomorrow or might not exist tomorrow. I So I don't want to endorse any of them. One thing I will definitely not endorse though is the AI within Grammarly. I think that does nothing but make your writing worse. I can stand behind that claim.
Mhm.
okay, so now we're going to ask you to do a little bit of work. We are going to look at some samples, but before then, we're going to look at some sample prompts. So what I have here are examples that I took from real life for a variety of different opportunities. So the first one in an essay, this is pretty typical, an essay of approximately 500 words, which you will probably see quite commonly, that 500 words. State your purpose in undertaking graduate study at fill in the blank. As part of your statement of purpose, describe your academic and research interests, career objectives, and how a degree from this school will enable you to achieve those goals. Again, in some ways, that is tracing what we have asked, sort of that connecting the dots theme. The next one is a little bit more unique. Somebody asked earlier, can you have the same essay and just tweak it? This would be a case where if you had the first prompt and then another school that's asking you the second prompt, you probably couldn't use the same essay. That one where it's giving you 2 pages describing important or unusual aspects of yourself, not otherwise apparent in your application. The third is that dreaded, really vague, tell us about why you want to be a physician, or tell us about why you want to be in this program. Sometimes those that offer no direction are the hardest, and that's when you can, again, sort of fall back on the advice that we're giving here. And then some of them might be very specific. And the final one, how have your background and life experiences, including cultural, geographical, financial, educational, citizenship status, or other opportunities or challenges motivated your decision to pursue a graduate degree? This one, I believe, was from a California school, and probably some of these have changed at this point, but they often had statements where it was very clear that they were looking for a diverse pool of applicants to create a diversity on their campus. So they were asking for that in their essay. Okay, next slide. So we're going to look at a couple examples, and I know it's hard to read sometimes on the screen. I probably will not read them out loud unless anyone needs me to, but we'll give you a minute to read. Try to think about something that they're doing well, and then think about what you might do or encourage them to do to build on what they've written already. Is there some piece of it, a sentence that you think like, oh, let's focus there a little bit more? Because that's often what we're doing when we're meeting with students. I think in all of our offices, you produce something, a first draft, and then we're thinking, okay, you mentioned this experience. Could you tell me more about it? And then you tell the story that's really interesting. Like that needs to be in your opening paragraph. So look for those examples. Also note, we're only using opening paragraphs here because the nature of this workshop, we simply wouldn't have time for you to read 500-word essays and be able to do more than one. The opening paragraph in many cases should be very compelling, making the person want to read more, and that's why it can work well for this workshop. Okay, next slide, our first example. Okay, so we'll give you a minute to read this, and then I'll ask for your comments in chat, but again, take a minute first to take a look. Okay, maybe the easiest way to ask this is what advice should this student be following when you think of the slides that we just went through? What are the best practices that this applicant should be doing that they haven't done? And if you want to unmute yourself or simply put it in chat, that's fine. Right, avoiding the big words. Yes. What is jurisprudential system? Law. Like, I've always been interested in law would be totally fine. Yeah, everyone got the overly complicated words. showing, yes, Disha got that. Add more show, don't tell. This is entirely telling. There is absolutely no showing here at all. So let me ask, if you were going to ask, if you were working with this student, what would you want them to show? Could you give an example from their essay that would maybe be useful in an opening paragraph? Like what here would we want to know more about? Clear, like that they allude to but don't tell us about.
Why they're interested in law? Could that work in it?
It could, yes, and maybe
Briefly,
that,
like
yeah,
to
but
the
what
point.
here, like, is there any sentence here that you think they should be building on? Like, okay, let's take this sentence and go run with that. Like, anyone see anything?
I feel like the several personal misfortunes could be expanded on to show like how they overcame them. At this point, it kind of sounds like, oh, something bad happened to me. Like kind of like pity me, not I overcame it and grew from it.
Good observation. Like something happened, we don't know what it was, and we just have to take it for their word that they've overcome them. Lewis just commented in chat that the personal and professional background, they're telling us that it would be good for the school's diversity, but we have no idea what it is. So again, that's where one of the mantras we've been saying is be specific, be specific. You want to show, not tell. Yes, Mariana's asking what successes. We have no idea. Great. Okay, move on to the second sample now. Very different one. A little bit more dense in terms of the length. So take a second to, or a minute to read, and then we'll discuss this one. What do you all think about this opening paragraph? Is it compelling to you? What do we learn about the student? Any thoughts at all? Again, unmute yourself or put it into chat. Too many words wasted on the opening sentences. There is some rambling. Maya talks about it's not very personal. Right. Like, what do we actually learn about this person? Addison mentions that it could be a little bit more precise. Yes, all of those things. Again, if you read this quickly, maybe you'd say, oh, this is kind of interesting, but we don't actually learn anything about the student. And again, personal statement. This application or this applicant is doing what I often call philosophizing. They're telling us about what they believe about the world, but they're actually not telling us anything about them. And a good way of dealing with this, if this student really wants us to know what they believe in, tell us a story that they were involved in that shows many of these things. And that way, again, you don't have to be vague. You don't have to allude to things with no concrete examples. You should be seeing the trend here. Specifics, concrete examples, make it about you. Kimberly, for the sake of time, maybe we go to sample 4. Just seeing that we're at 416, although we love sample 3, but let's go to sample 4. What's your impression of this one? More personal than the other two. Jordan says all over the place as far as interest. Is it all over the, Kaylin says, I think they have a good use of past, present, and future. Yeah, so again, you can pick apart just about any application or any essay, but this is an example of a successful, this student got into every master's degree that he applied to. So he opened with, I think it, like in his first draft, it was something just about like how he hated architecture. Like in his first year, it was really about that, like architecture wasn't for me. And it didn't read well because he was trying to talk about his transition to his political science career and international affairs. And this was a way for those of you who've changed your major, sometimes that is a compelling story. Not always, but sometimes it is, because there's also action involved. So he changed his major. This event created action. It was changing my major, starting to read on this, doing research on this. And now this is the degree about it. But yes, I know past applicants have said like, well, where does military service come in? I don't know what to make of that. And this is part of the challenge of just using an opening paragraph. If you saw his next paragraph, you would see the connection between his studies and his interest in security and military service. We wanted to give you one that was sort of a final version that led to success. Okay, next slide. And I think this goes back to Bob.
You are correct. Always enjoy the samples. I feel like we should save essay number 3 as like the bonus after the movie kind of thing, the whatever. But just to kind of wind us towards the end and allow some time for questions, I'll walk through some additional tips for success, just broad um, ideas to kind of help you get started. Oh, where do I start? First and foremost, identify the essay requirements. Don't spend a lot of time just sitting down writing your story until you know what it is that the place wants to know about your story. That'll make the writing a lot more effective, efficient use of your time. So track down, what is it that I'm being asked to write about? If we're talking about programs that have centralized application portals like med school, dental schools, there's probably a few others where there's one question and it goes to all the places, great. But for most everyone, they're applying to 4 or 5 different schools in some academic programs. And these are going to have some overlap, but also some differences in what they want to know. So just identify those requirements. Use those requirements as an outline to get you started. It keeps you on track. So in that first sample question, there was like 4 or 5 sub-questions nested in there. We'll break them apart, and now you have an outline that will ensure you're sticking to responding to these questions. Consider incorporating these core themes into your personal statement. And this, I want to pause for a second and say a good chunk of doing this work is actually spending time in our own heads and reflecting on these answers. What experiences do I have? What am I good at? What do I want to do in the future, even if it's going to change? So your motivations and interests, right? These are things that you might be asked to address. So you need to think about those answers, in advance. What experiences do you have? What kind of skills, your goals in graduate school or future career plans? Should I be chronological? Maybe, but not necessarily. It's a good starting point, And it's a good way to work through that past, present, future, but sometimes moving things around makes the writing interesting too and doesn't necessarily affect the overall composition. It's a question more than anything, maybe, but not necessarily.
Yeah, and I could chime in on that.
Oh,
I've had
please.
some students who have been um, who've done really amazing things in their current, like what they're doing now is very impressive. And maybe their past was less didn't stand out as much. So sometimes you can open with like, hey, this experience and Jennifer, I'll fix that link in a second. Sorry about that. Maybe that experience in the lab that you're in right now, where you discovered something new, is amazing. And you can open with that and then go back in time to explain where that interest came from. So sometimes it can be really compelling, especially if what you're doing now is really cool, interesting, and maybe what you did in your past is less so. So think about that. And I'm going to send the correct link right now to that article. Sorry.
Be prepared to write multiple drafts. And I saw Barbara made a note in the side, don't be perfectionist with your first draft. I run into this often where a student will make an appointment or a recent alum and they'll cancel it because they haven't finished. And I wish, like, I'll reach out and say, I don't need to see the finished thing. Let's just see where you are. And we'll work through and push and push and push. You're going to rewrite this a number of times. I don't want to say 20. I don't want to say twice. It's going to vary for everybody, right? But you're going to do it more than once. I don't think any of us could say, yeah, the first draft was knocked it out of the park. There's always, room to sharpen and strengthen, and that's what we're here for, and we want to do for you. So plan ahead. Don't save I'll get to the personal essay 2 weeks before the application deadline thing. That's kind of rough. I wouldn't recommend that. Remember to directly answer the questions in the prompt. I think I heard Barbara or Kimberly mention earlier, be direct. You don't have a lot of room to like spin out a whole narrative story that's a book. You got to be direct, get to the point. For sure, seek out feedback from others. And when I say others, I mean folks that are trained, experienced, do this for a living, um, and academic advisors, other professors who might also run into this a lot. This is a little different, and no shade to parents and siblings or roommates, but they have a different perspective and view and lens that they look at this type of writing through. You can take it all in, but for sure seek feedback from others. And then, yeah, proofread, proofread, proofread again. In terms of some resources that you have access to right now at Temple University, and some of these even after you graduate, the Writing Center, the Fellowships Advising, Career Center, Pre-Professional Health. I put a list of those links here in the chat. It didn't look as pretty as it did when I first put it in, but they're in there where you can go and find each of us. And then, yeah, we're open to questions. We're a little bit under time, which is great. But feel free, if you have questions, drop them in the chat or unmute. Pre-law
And
advising.
I did just drop something in chat for when people are saying what they're applying for, there are a couple PhDs or MD PhDs in there. And I did want to stress that your personal statement might look like might be focused on your evolution as a researcher, where those research interests came from, your first research experience and how you built on that. But it's really going to depend in many cases on your program, and that's where you should be talking with faculty in your program about what they want to see in the personal statement. And that also helps you connect with the faculty member who can then become your cheerleader when the department is meeting to select new students. So for those applying to PhD programs, don't forget about that connecting with faculty in your program. They might offer very helpful advice on what they think you need to talk about in your personal statement. Lewis asked about pre-law advising. There is not one central office for pre-law advising on Temple's campus, as far as I know. In CLA, there is a pre-law advisor, and I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now, Professor Crow. And in Fox, there's legal studies, and they have advising for law. My office, we do regularly read personal statements for students applying to law school, and I think that the Career Center and the Writing Center probably do as well.
Yep.
Any questions? Feel free to put it in chat or to unmute yourself. And don't be afraid. My guess is that if you have a question, somebody else in the audience has a similar question.
I have a link for our pre-law person here. I'll drop this in here. Hopefully you're still here, Lewis.
I have a quick question, just like in general, when is there a good time to like kind of start like prepping your materials and everything as like an undergrad student?
So I can jump in on that real quick because one of the links that I put in here, and I'll do it again just so it stands out, has a timeline, a general timeline. It's hard to, you know, put every program under the same umbrella because there's variables, but an overwhelming majority kind of fit this particular timeline, and you'll see like when to start, assuming a December closing of an application window. With respect to the personal statement, I think our advice, and I think it's what we have on this resource here, by the summertime of that year you're going to apply, you would have an idea, like you have nailed down where you're going to apply to, and you know what their essay requirements are, and you might start doing some drafting of that. Can you wait till later? Sure, but what else is happening later? Classes have started, all of that. And now you have that extra work layered on. So in my dream ideal picture world, the summertime's a nice time to, kind of get those things rolling and then refine them out during the busier time of the semester.
There's a question in the chat. Do you mind giving a summary of the most important points we should remember? And I want to turn that back on the audience and ask you all, tell me, out of everything we've talked about, what is one important thing you feel like you're going to remember most of all? Put in the chat or unmute yourself. Show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Sorry. I feel like two of my biggest takeaways was not to like over dramatize your personal statement, and not to basically make it a like a resume 2.0.
Yeah, absolutely.
Naya, I liked your statement about talking from a place of power, not trauma. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have another question. This is actually I saw the grad school abroad session. This is a little bit more personalized, but if someone wanted to do like an abroad semester during their senior year fall, would you advise against it?
I think you need to talk with an academic advisor about that, because that's going to vary significantly from school to school and major to major, and where you are in completing your major, and whether you're doing a Temple program or a non-Temple program. So we're not academic advisors, and I think the best person to discuss that with would be an academic advisor. Unless anyone here has something else to say about that. I mean, there's no reason non-academically to not do that, but there might be limitations on what you could do.
Yeah, from a non-academic perspective, I think you would agree, like that's a great experience that can only enhance you know, things that you can write about in essays, use in applications for programs. But yeah, you do have to be cognizant of any kind of obstacles, restrictions, requirements in the academic side.
And Mariana, right before the session, I was meeting with a student who is a senior who is studying at Temple Rome this semester. But she is able to take coursework directly for her major, and not everyone could do that. So it will depend on what you want to do.
But I'm glad to see that somebody saw our study abroad program on the horizon. Guess our
Yeah, I put that into the chat. So if anyone's left and you're
okay.
interested in going to grad school abroad, some of the personal statement advice might be slightly different for that, but we are offering a session next Wednesday on going to grad school abroad. So if you're interested in that, register, and we'll see you then. Thanks for everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going
Thanks,
to
everyone. Good luck.
start recording.